Welcome back to the Colossal Color Showdown. This is episode 12 and we're going to be looking at the Cobalt Teals. We are back to the original normal format of all the brands. So we have Daniel Smith, Holbein, Sennelier, Schmincke, Winsor Newton, Quo, M. Graham, Mission Gold, Casa, and we have Lucas for the student grade box. Jackson's doesn't have a Cobalt Teal, Cobalt Turquoise color, and Da Vinci does have a Cobalt Turquoise, but I wasn't able to get hold of them, so I'm very sorry that that color is missing. For this series, I've been trying to stick to a single color name because as beginners, we tend to just go by color name before we learn the pigments, and I want to show you how varied and how you can't quite rely on color names alone. However, in this episode, I have to make an exception because a lot of brands have a lot of different names for this tealy color that we're looking for. Some call it Cobalt Teal something, like Cobalt Teal Blue or Cobalt Teal, and others call it Cobalt Turquoise, like Cobalt Turquoise, Cobalt Turquoise Light, Turquoise Green. So it was necessary to just go by the kind of shade of color that we're all looking for when we think of the Cobalt Teal color. So the colors we have for this episode is Cobalt Teal Blue by Daniel Smith, Cobalt Turquoise Light by Holbein, Turquoise Green by Sennelier, Cobalt Turquoise by Schmincke, Cobalt Turquoise Light by Winsor Newton, Cobalt Teal by Quo, Cobalt Teal by M. Graham, Cobalt Turquoise by Mission Gold, and Cass Art's Cobalt Teal, as well as the Cobalt Turquoise by Lucas. Most of the colors are PG50, the Daniel Smith, Sennelier, Schmincke, Winsor Newton, Quo, as well as the Cobalt Teal by Cass Art and Lucas's one are all made out of PG50. The exceptions are Holbein and M. Graham both use PB28, and then for some weird reason, Mission Gold felt it necessary to mix three pigments, the PB28, which is the same as Holbein and M. Graham, as well as PY3, a yellow pigment, as well as PW6, that's white. And I have to say, for mixing three colors, it hasn't really made that much of a difference in terms of hue. It's definitely different from this, but the Holbein one was different from M. Graham anyway. So if you do get a little bit twitchy about multiple pigments in an unnecessary way, then I would avoid the Mission Gold's one. For each brand, I just picked the color that was closest to the color we think of when it comes to Cobalt Teal. However, Holbein's one is the most blue out of all the teal colors. This is as tealy as Holbein gets. I would say the most green one is the Daniel Smith one, and it's also noticeably more granulating than all the other colors. It's then followed by over here the Winsor Newton and the Quo one. They're very nice, slightly green tealy color. On the bluer side we have Mission Golds, which is a step more green than the Holbein, but it's still on the bluer side, as well as Sennelier and Schmincke. And in the middle we have M. Graham and Cass Art and the Lucas one. One thing I do have to mention is that the Daniel Smith one was incredibly hard to re-wet compared to all the other colors. I just had to sit there and scrub away at the color to get any kind of color. It doesn't have a high tinting strength. It's more of the particles in it are colored rather than an overall color. The Schmincke's one went down very smooth, as it has been for the whole series. I'm very impressed at how Schmincke colors are such a joy to put down on paper so far in this series. Let's look at the prices next. Not surprisingly, Quo's one is the most expensive by being £1.45 per milliliter. The prices are UK prices. I've taken them from Jackson's so that we can compare the UK prices. If you're interested in the US prices, a very helpful patron has been listing the US prices for us over on my Patreon, which is patreon.com/Oto Kano. So thank you, Christina Todd, for all the hard work in doing the research for us. The cheapest one is normally the Jackson's, but because the Jackson doesn't have a tealy turquoise color, it is the Senneliers is the cheapest by being 60 pence per milliliter. That's less than half price of the core one. So this and this is more than twice the price of this color. Although I do have to say, I do love the hue of the Quartz Cobalt Teal. However, Winsor & Newton's one is very similar in hue, and that's a lot cheaper at £1.10 per milliliter. So if you do want to save a little bit of money, then you could consider Winsor & Newton one. One thing I have to mention while I'm using this info sheet is how many of the colors split from their binder. The Senneliers one and even Quartz one, surprisingly for the price, had some binder that split from the pigment. However, the worst culprit was Cassart's one, and I will show you a little video that shows how bad the binder split was when I poured the paint out on the palette. Just wanted to show you how much binder came out of Cass's paint. I think there's actually more binder than pigment or paint that came out of my tube from Cass. As you can see, the binder just was horrendously split from the pigments, and I kept pouring out more paint to see if it would get better, and it just kept pouring out more split binders. So I have to say, I would not recommend Cassart's Cobalt Teal whatsoever. Of course, a binder split can be caused from many different reasons. It could be that the paints have been sat there for a longer time than the other colors. We just don't know what really causes binder split. But with Cobalt Teals, I do definitely notice more binder split across the color than any other color we've covered so far. It doesn't, of course, mean that the tube you're going to buy from either the Sennelier, Core or Cassart's is going to be as badly affected by the binder split. And it also doesn't mean that the other brands are sure to not have binder split. Cobalt pigments are quite heavy pigments, so they do tend to split from the binder a little bit easier than other pigments anyway. So just be aware that when you're buying cobalt colors, you are going to experience more binder split. Don't worry if you get some binder split though, because all you have to do is get a toothpick and just mix it about again and you should be okay. Moving on to the transparency test, and cobalt colors tend to be very opaque. The most opaque one out of the lot was the Sennelier's one. You can really see how much more opaque that color is compared to the other colors. I would say that there's three that are the second most opaque, and that's these three: the Winsor & Newton one, the Core one, and the Lucas one. Lucas one, it being a student quality color, does seem to have whiteness to it, and that's probably a filler. It's a different type of opacity to the other cobalt colors. It's more powdery overall whiteness. The most transparent out of the cobalt colors were Daniel Smith's, followed by Schmincke. And then the Holbein, M. Graham and the Mission Gold are somewhere in the middle. Now onto the lift. And with the Cobalt Teal, it's very non-staining color, and so a lot of the colors will lift off very, very easily and very cleanly. Easiest colors to lift were the Cobalt Teal by Cassart's, the Turquoise Green by Sennelier, as well as Cobalt Teal by Core. These came off almost back to white. When I do the lifting test, what I do is I swipe with a damp, clean brush 3 times and then pat the area dry and then do that again. So I do it 3 times, 3 sets of 3 strokes, and with these 3 colors it was back to white after the second round, let alone the third round. So if you want a nice easy lifting colors, I would go for Sennelier, Core or Cassart. The most staining of the colors were the Cobalt Turquoise Light by Holbein and Schmincke's Cobalt Turquoise. They are still stained on the paper a little bit even after 3 rounds. All the other colors lifted to a clean white by the 3rd round of lifting. In terms of glazing, because it's a very low staining color and it's opaque, it is harder to do glazing with, and you can really see that in, say, like this. What I do is I go around, draw a box, and then fill that box in, and you can really see where when I go over it once and then go over that line again, the pigments in the bottom layer have really lifted, leaving this lighter edge and a darker box. And you notice that a lot in the M. Graham's one, Mission Gold's one, Lucas's one, Winsor & Newton's one, and Quar's one, and a little bit on the Sennelier's one. So if you do want to do layers with Cobalt Teal, it's not the easiest, you're not going to have the easiest time, but if you are going to do it, then I would stick to colours like Daniel Smith's one, it's pretty good, and Holbein's one. Although Holbein's one is a little bit more blue than other colours, and Daniel Smith's one, as we said, is incredibly hard to re-wet. This month's Patreon exclusive dot card is Yellow Ochres. Yellow Ochres were the 3rd colour we covered in this series, and if you fancy carrying out your own comparisons, but if you don't want to commit to buying 8 full tubes, then this is a really great economical way of trying out 8 colours. You get 7 artist quality colours: Daniel Smith, Holbein, Sennelier, Schmincke, M. Graham, Jackson's, Casas, and then you have 1 student grade of Van Gogh colour to carry out many tests to decide which yellow ochre is your favourite. Yellow ochre is a very fundamental colour in your palette, so it's really good to be able to find the perfect yellow ochre for your palette. If you would like to receive this dot card, then do head on over to patreon.com/Oto Kano, where you can sign up for the appropriate tiers to receive this dot card this month. So that's it for this episode, but in the next episode we're going to do the gradated washes, the salt test, and the color mixes, and we'll see how the difference in hue affects how it mixes with other colors. If this video was interesting and useful to you, then please do give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. Thank you so much for watching this episode, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!